It's Paul Adams from Branson Adams. We're a podcast today on the three things from Branson Adams, and I'm joined today by the lovely Penny Power, who I would call a friend, a client, and a local celebrity. Good morning, Penny.
Oh, I also like the order you put those in. That was very lovely.
So we're going to talk about Penny's life story today and pick up on her three things as we go through. So I guess, where did it all start, Penny? Because you were born, I'm not going to give your age away, but it was not dissimilar time to me.
I don't mind saying my age. I'm 56, so 64, proudly a baby boomer. Where did it all start? I suppose you mean in business, because I don't think anybody wants to know anything more than that.
But why not? What happened before business? Was it all good before business?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I've a lovely family, lovely parents. I had a relatively lonely childhood because I was the youngest of four. And so I think actually the loneliness I experienced has played a part in the way that I've wanted to build business, which will probably become clear when we speak. I think loneliness is huge. In fact, we just did a poll, 51% of business owners that we polled were feeling very lonely. And it is, isn't it? I mean, I bet loads of your clients talk to you and love the fact that you're so caring because they're lonely. So loneliness played a part in that. And that's no reflection on my parents, just circumstance. We lived in a very quiet village outside Newbury and siblings had gone. Anyway, I always wanted to go into a caring profession. I wanted to be a physiotherapist and work with physically handicapped children. That was because a neighbour had a child with cerebral palsy and I absolutely adored him so much. And after school and in school holidays, I spent time with him. And then when I was a bit older, I was allowed to do voluntary work in a physio department with children with disabilities. I failed academically to get into doing physiotherapy. I couldn't get to degree level. And then I did apply to do a degree in psychology and had that place. And while I was waiting for that year, I wanted to move out of home. I got a job doing telesales in IT. And then as a result, I never left because I had a brilliant boss who said that I was really allowed to be myself. And rather than use all these sort of manipulative sales tools and scripts, he allowed me to use relationship. And I was a very successful salesperson. And through jumping around in the IT industry in the 80s a few times in different jobs, I ended up being sales and marketing director of quite a big company. And
sorry, Penny, that's your first thing, or there were three things, you roll in telesales and do it your own way.
It was, and there is a story behind that, which is quite lovely. And I think it's sort of one of those stories people tend to remember. I call it my tunes moment. So it's because of a packet of cough sweets. You remember the tunes? And it was that I'd been on a telesales training course in Wales, was the first thing they sent me on. And I sat there thinking, this is not my world, because there were these very ball-breaking people on this course, all very success-driven for the sale. That wasn't something that was ever going to really drive me. And then they were taught scripts, and I couldn't even remember one line of a Shakespeare poem when I was at school. Thought of remembering a script. It was a bit like Phoebe when she did telesales in Friends, anybody that's watched that. And when I came back, I attempted to do that, but I actually froze. I didn't like it on the phone. And it got to the point where I was pretending to make calls and ticking off things. And then one day, a guy answered a phone call called Roland, and he was the buyer for a computer dealer. I mean, we're talking about 1983. He was a buyer for a computer dealer in Tolworth called Data Systems Electronics. And he had a terrible throat, really bad cough. And I felt really sorry for him. And I said, oh, sorry, Roland, you've not heard from me before. I'm Penny. I'm ringing from a company called Bitech. And I'm trying to sell you some computer printers and stuff. And he said, oh, I know Bitech. I haven't bought from there for ages, but I feel really ropey, Penny. I'm going home now, actually. Call me another day. So when I got back, at lunchtime that day, I went off to buy a sandwich for myself in a ropey old cafe. Didn't have anything like we have nowadays. And standing on the counter was a display of cough sweets. And I thought, oh, Roland. And I bought them. And I went back to the office and I said to Suzanne, my supervisor, would I be allowed a jiffy bag and to use the franking machine? And she said, what for? And I said, I just want to send this dealer a packet of tunes. She thought I was barking mad. And she said, well, if you do it, you pay for it yourself. So I went to the admin person and gave them my coins for everything. And wrote a little note and sent it to him, just saying, I hope you feel better when you get back to work. And there was no hidden agenda in that. I just felt nice to do that. And anyway, he rang about 4 days later. The call got put through to me, and the first time a sales call had ever gone through to me. And he said, get a pen and paper. And I wrote out 2 pages of A4 of orders, and didn't even know what I was taking orders for. I was so confused. Thanked him ever so much, and went and took this over to my supervisor and said, I don't know how to put this into the computer system. And she said, how on earth did you get that? That's the biggest order we've had in months. I said, I sent him some tunes. And, you know, I think it really became a little bit of a folklore story. And as I then got promoted to supervisor and then sales manager, and then I left a company, and then I actually went back there 6 years later. I was asked, sort of headhunted back to it by a recruitment agency to be the sales and marketing director. And it was at a time when computers and everything was very commoditized, and I just very believed in long-term relationships with people. So that was my telesales story of finding my own way through the maze. And I think if people can do that, life's a lot easier.
How long did you work for people? Because ultimately you became self-employed. So what was the decision to sort of change from one to the other?
So I met Thomas, and we got married within 13 months of meeting. So we got married in 1990, and so 30 years this year. And we knew that very quickly we wanted to get married and have a family. But I had a very, very good salary, and Thomas was the entrepreneur of the 2 of us. And but we agreed that if we did get lucky enough to have a child, I wouldn't work. And so we designed our life around that set of values that were right for us. And I think it's different then, because there wasn't that much flexibility. You know, I know you've got people working from home that have got children, and, you know, good employers have more flexibility built in, but in the 80s that didn't exist, the 80s and 90s. So it was a real on or off experience. So I, at 28, found myself at home with Hannah in Farnham on Middlebourne Lane. And I loved it, and I felt very privileged to be able to be at home with my baby. But ultimately, you know, I did miss the work environment. And so the first thing I did was, my godfather owned a brand of baby furniture, and I started to be an agent for him, just selling baby furniture. I called it Little Acorns. And I liked doing that. I suppose that was my first little tiny foray into working for myself. And then after Ross was born, Thomas was told about an opportunity from a guy that left Dell Computer Corporation, and he used to work for Michael Dell, and Thomas knew Michael Dell. And this guy, Martin, was setting up a network of people who worked from home to sell the computers into the home. And he had done a deal with Compaq. And at the time, I mean, we're talking 1995, 96. At the time, they were the first people that had these sort of integrated systems where you had your DVD driver in it, a CD-ROM, I should say, not DVD, CD-ROM. And Usborne Books came out with all these amazing things, encyclopedias and books and things that come alive online. And Thomas introduced me to him, and he said, would you be my first agent? And I said, well, if I can do it around my home life, yes. And so in Farnham, I used to go to schools and do what they called technology days, and parents would come in and we'd demonstrate the power of this at home. You'd go to the house in people's houses around Farnham and take the computer into their house and sell them. But actually, this was set up in a multi-level marketing way, because they wanted home workers who could become technology friends, so people who understood technology, to have this as a second income. And I ended up recruiting 680 agents. And it was really interesting because there was nothing really to run a community of agents on. I had CompuServe, very complicated CompuServe email address. I used to sit under my stairs at home, in our dining room was under the stairs, and work away on this in the evenings and things. And every Saturday I went to Richmond, and anybody that was recruited by anyone, I would run a training session to them and teach them. And I suppose I learnt the power of community, but I had to do it as an email address. And then Well, that was where the idea of Academy came from, because Thomas was, and that was the second thing, you know.
It's your second thing. So
Yeah.
you've been self-employed for a while and you've got this brain idea. And
yeah, and I think by this point in 97, we had 3 children. Thomas's career was doing really well. He was working very much in that very early internet world, and he was doing a lot of public speaking. He was doing work bringing American companies over to the UK to set up and helping them do all sorts of find the right people. Thomas is the ultimate networker. I mean, he is just phenomenal, not just because his ability to remember names and connect people, but he's incredibly altruistic and giving in the way that he unconditionally supports people. And one day we were in Pizza Express on Castle Street, and a Saturday afternoon, it was the 7th of February, and I said to Thomas, the kids were with us, you know, you love networking, and you've got MySpace, and we've got Friends Reunited, but there's nothing for business. And wouldn't it be amazing if you could network online, and we can network globally and help all these people that are going onto the internet and having their .coms to support and learn from one another? And that's where, at age 33, the Academy was born, which was really an altruistic thing. I didn't look to be an entrepreneur in that way. I wanted something that I could dabble with around the children and make friends around the world and support them and connect them and love them and stop them feeling lonely. But it was a proper, full-blown entrepreneur experience. It became huge. It took off, and I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but I knew that I couldn't be the CEO. Thomas couldn't be the CEO. He had his own business and clients. And whilst he was very passionate about Academy and came up with the name of Academy, it didn't make sense financially for us, or we didn't really know what road we were on for him to stop doing what he was doing. And we converted our garage into an office, and in the evenings I worked on it all. And then a guy called Steve that I had known in my past life heard about it and offered me £250,000 to invest in it. And he wanted to be a major shareholder, but we negotiated, and he was just under I remained just over the majority. But it was really interesting when you bring someone into your business life, into your life like that, you do turn it into a business, because here you have an investor who's wanting their money back. And that makes life a lot more serious. But the other thing that makes it very serious is that I then said, I can't be the CEO of this. There's no way I can achieve my values as a mum and never let anyone down in business. So he said, well, I'll be the CEO. And he came in as CEO. And very quickly, he could smell the money. He could see what the opportunity was. A nominated advisor, somebody contacted us and said, you could put this on AIM. And they then insisted on Thomas being in the company, because he was because all of our lives were in it then. The wonderful thing is that meant Thomas was very much working in it full time. And then it exploded. It just exploded around the world, because there was no other social network in the world. We saw small ones spring up, the one called Rise in San Francisco. We saw another one spring up in Germany called Zing. But then ultimately LinkedIn came in 2002, which didn't worry us at all, because their philosophy was very different, and they were very much going after the corporate world. We were very much going after the small business, and we also wanted it to be social, not just business. And LinkedIn was all about what you are. I don't know whether you want me to take a breath at this point, Paul.
Well, yeah, because I'm conscious it was a real roller coaster journey, because you've started it, you sort of rode it all the way up, and I'm conscious we're going to come down in a minute.
We did come down. I mean, it took 12 years. And I suppose the first thing was that by the time we'd started Academy, Thomas and I had a beautiful home, a really nice big home. Somebody called it a castle. It was a lovely home in Farnham. And we had our children, destined to go to the schools around Farnham, and one over in Haslemere that would be great. And, lifestyle was I suppose you'd call it a rich lifestyle. And we were having to work very hard to serve the business. And life became very serious. Now we were down to do, and it was 3 days before the flotation. And we were down, Thomas and I were valued at £22 million on paper. We were working very hard. I had suddenly found myself, while I was still actually breastfeeding TJ, our youngest, found myself having to go up to London to do interviews with financial PR and on the front pages of the national press. And it was a very, very heady time. It was really that you never step back to actually reconsider, is this what we want out of life? You just were on that treadmill. And then some people will remember in 2000, the dot-com boom, everybody thinking they're going to be millionaires, and then the crash. And what happened was lastminute.com went out, and that crashed the market. And we got a call saying, your flotation's not going to happen. By then, the business was highly geared. We had offices because we had to get seed investment. So we'd had £750,000 worth of seed investment. Thomas had got literally one night up in London doing a presentation to all these people in the city that wanted to put money into the next big thing. Thomas came home with £750,000 worth of checks of around 25 grand per check. And I remember our financial director said, did you give them a certificate? Did you give them anything? He said, no, they're just giving me them. And he was like panicking to get all of this registered and give them their share certificates. It was mad. And it was heady and it was scary, and no champagne popping moments. And then, of course, it all collapsed. And by then, we had a lot of people expecting a lot of us, 42 shareholders. And suddenly the market crashed. And not only for us, but for our members. And, easy thing to do would be, we'll just close this now. But you can't. You've got responsibilities. And we are very, very... Thomas and I, our integrity is a very high set of values, and we also believed it was needed. People became more and more dependent on it, and so our emotion over this business took over, really, and also our huge business commitment to return people their money and the investors. And then we launched a subscription service. So we were the first to have subscription as software as a service, effectively, and people paid $10 or €10 or £10. And life took off. It was very, very good, and we could reinvest in the business, and slowly, all built. And it was amazing. Thomas travelled all over the world. I travelled sometimes with him as long as the kids could come. As they got a bit older, Thomas would stay home, and I would travel and do the speaking. We had events in London every month. 600 people would come. 1,000 came for our 10th birthday. And then LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter were really getting stronger, and they were free. And that was the disruption. It wasn't the belief in the business. It wasn't the technology. It wasn't anything other than, if you're fighting a business that's organically funded against people who have got $300 million and more from Russia, China, all over the world, and they can make it free. I mean, it'd be like a restaurant in Farnham opening up, putting all their heart into it, and then a few years later somebody saying, actually, come next door, you can eat and drink for all you want for free. You don't stand much of a chance. So the loyal members stayed and paid, but you get natural churn in membership, and the new members looked at the front page and said, shit, I'm not going to pay. It became harder and harder. And then we also went through a large retail bank was going to buy us. And that was very exciting. 9 months of massive due diligence. And on the day we went to sign those forms with all the lawyers present on the 33rd floor of a place in Canary Wharf, was the day that their CEO was on the front page of all the newspapers during the banking crisis as being the worst person in the world. Almost sort of people wanted to murder him. And so the lawyers walked into the room and said, we can't buy you. So that was our second big tumble, very painful. And then we decided, let's borrow money from a bank, and a bank lent us £250,000 in order to pivot the model to be free. And we were doing really well. We were paying them back. We weren't drawing a salary, Thomas and I, out of the business at the time, and we were getting it paid back. And then the bank, 3 years into that, went to 6,000 other businesses plus us and said, we're withdrawing your loan, and gave us two gave us 29 days to repay 2 years that were left. And by then we didn't own our own house, we had no leverage, we couldn't get an investor, and it had to go. And it sold to a man who unfortunately changed the name and changed it into a different business. And 2012, we lost our business. We'd already lost our home anyway. But big time, we lost our identity, really. And that was a big thing to lose, because Thomas and Penny were the founders of the Academy. We're still here in 2020 talking about it.
We touched on it. Yeah, I mean, the effect of that must have been devastating. So we know why you closed, and how far did the effects go for you and Thomas?
Well, initially, like anyone, like anybody in this sort of COVID, I mean, this is recorded during the pandemic, and people will listen, maybe in years to come, they might come across this recording, or they might be listening to it when you publish it. And, anybody that hits a financial adversity and you've got family and commitments, you don't have any time to think about your own mental health or self-care. You purely, you go into survival mode. And actually, I had been building a separate idea called Digital Youth Academy on the back of writing a Digital Business Britain manifesto with the government about the importance of digital skills. And so we had this other business where I had investors in it. We weren't drawing income from it, but it was a beautiful business that I suppose helped my self-worth a bit and helped me to feel quite relevant. Thomas got non-executive director positions, but we lost the business we absolutely loved, but I did fall in love with Digital Youth Academy, and we ran that for 3 years, ultimately, because we weren't a training provider ourselves, and we had created an apprenticeship that we licensed through further education colleges. Government changed their regulations around apprenticeships, and we had to sell that business before its time, really, to a training provider so that they could then do more with it. We helped 1,000 young people into work who were hard to reach, unemployed people. Worked with Guildford College. Paul Marcus at Eagle Radio was so supportive. He was lovely. Even gave me one of those hero awards, the ones that, local hero awards, which was beautiful. 2014, completely out of the blue, actually November 2013, I got a letter awarding me an OBE for the contribution Academy made, which is amazing validation. So there was great things happening, but financially we had over £2 million worth of debt that we needed to deal with and work very hard to pay down. There was no doubt about it. Thomas and I believed we could do that, and there was absolutely no desire at all to go bankrupt. We wanted to be directors of a business fairly soon, and all these reasons. And about 4 years ago, we celebrated the fact that we are now debt-free, and we've worked extremely hard to achieve that. But when you become debt-free, your children are older. We took a breath. Thomas, unfortunately, became ill with bowel cancer, which is definitely down to stress. We had already coped with some very sad deaths in our family. My niece dying when she was 29, my brother dying of pancreatic cancer at 63, other traumas, my mum having dementia and dying. That had all happened at the same time. And as some people who might listen to this may have listened to the interview Hannah had, our daughter on Eagle Radio, she was abducted by 3 men and raped. So dealing with the financial stress, and on top of that, a lot of family emotional traumas. Thomas and I looked at each other one day. We'd burnt a spreadsheet, which we called our money monster, which was where we were calculating income and how we could pay down debt. We burnt that over in a fire half with a glass of champagne, took a breath and said, now what's the rest of our life? What are we going to do with the rest of our lives? And we reassessed it and redefined and rethought, what do we love? What do we take from this incredible life journey we've been on together? And give ourselves permission to redesign it. And we started working with you, Paul, as our accountant, which I was thrilled to do. I think you sat and listened to many of our stories, and we've redesigned it, and we have a fantastic life now doing what we're doing, which is, I suppose, our third stage that we were going to talk about.
Well, that's it, because I know that you sort of took a year out to retreat, so
Yeah.
presumably was part of the decision process And your third thing is deciding you were allowed, in your words, to choose the life and the business that suited you.
Yeah, I think it's true, because I think the drivers you have in your 20s to find you who you are and what you're good at and become an independent person for the first time after your family, your children, your parents have looked after you. Then your drivers through your 30s and 40s, depending on what you've got yourselves into and pay for your children. Suddenly you've got the allowed bit comes from, well, really, it's back to us and how we're going to support ourselves. And we're allowed to do that. I mean, of course, we'll still always love and support our children, but they are very independent, strong kids. And so that year, Thomas actually, it started off with me having a bit of a fright. In November, December, no, the end of November 2017, I was delivering a talk to about 40 people. And unfortunately, for many reasons, but none unknown to me, I started to hallucinate, and the faces of the people in the audience were changing, and they were morphing into the faces of people that had trolled us in the past. So these are people that had really tried to abuse us online, and they were the people that we had had to ban from the Academy, and that was very hard to do. They were very addicted to Academy, but they were nasty people. And so that happened, and it was a very scary moment. And after I'd finished my talk, I went to hospital thinking I'd had a hemorrhage or something, and they did all the neuro assessments, said there's nothing wrong with you neurologically, but perhaps you should go and see your GP and talk things through. And I went in to see a doctor at Farnham Dean, and she knows me well, and she said, Penny, when did you ever going to realise that this stress you've put yourself through and all these traumas you've gone through, not the trolls, the financial traumas, the family traumas, the 6 house moves, all dealing with what was a lot. And she said, I really think you should go and talk to someone. So it was incredible. I went to see Dr. Anna Collins in Farnham, brilliant lady. I write about her in my book. And I sat with her over about 6 months. I went to see every couple of weeks, and I unpicked stuff and came to realize that some things had deeply affected my belief in myself. And she questioned the choices I was making about how we were living our lives and whether or not we had to live it so stressfully. And so I actually sort of took a step back. We were living on Castle Street at the time. And I said, I'm going to, apart from doing the speeches that I'm committed to, I'm going to just step back. I had no clients I couldn't handle quietly. And I just stopped the push. And that was fine. Thomas had some great clients and could support us. But unfortunately, in the July of that year, 4 months after I'd made that decision, Thomas got diagnosed with bowel cancer. And that was really tough. Thomas handled it phenomenally. I mean, absolutely beyond your imagination. He had quite a major operation. Hannah by now was living in Bali. We went to Bali for a few weeks with Ross and TJ to see Hannah. And when we came back, he then started his chemotherapy. And so all in all, it was about a year where we really had to think about things. And in doing that, we talked about what we love and what we don't want. I mean, there's a great saying that Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, said when I was watching an interview with him and Elon Musk on YouTube. And he said, oh, a clever man knows what he wants. A wise man knows what he doesn't want. And not many of us actually spend time thinking about what we don't want. And so we worked on a process of elimination, really. And as a result of that, we knew that we loved working with business owners. We knew the type of business owner we love working with. We know the journey we've been through and the empathy that we can have with certain people who have probably gone through their own adversity. We knew we needed to and wanted to work for the next 15, 20 years. So we just sort of looked at what can we pace our life around that is really beautiful, but also honors us and honors the fact that we are very experienced and we have got a lot of skills. And we came up with this mastermind program, which is fantastic. And we launched that in April 2019. The first 12 people joined us, and we are so utterly grateful for them trusting us. They've been through a year with us now. We've seen the way that we've been able to love and transform them and give them more confidence and their self-worth, but also bring in experts to help them. So then we launched our next one in September, and then the third one was due to start in March, and obviously that's been put on hold a bit with COVID, which was a bit of a shock, like it is to everybody, because we thought we'd actually designed a life that couldn't be disrupted again, and obviously it has been. But that's given us the joy of sitting back again, and on our walks that we normally wouldn't be on, we'd be normally on a train to London, we came up with the idea of something called BIP 100. And BIP stands for Business is Personal, which is the brand that we now use from my book, Business is Personal. And we're going to launch a very small community hosted on Facebook for 100 people who we're going to have an application system, which is it's going to be launched on bip100.club. And through that, we're wanting to find people that what we talk about resonates with them. And we're going to bring in skills, we're going to have networking online. Thomas and I have just bought a camper van, which we're very excited about. And we're going to put a bip100.club on the road, banner down the side of it. We're going to drive around and see our special clients that we've got. And we really feel with our mastermind clients, which total 24, when we have 2 a year that start, and our BIP 100, we can really engineer the sort of life we want to lead, which is what we're doing now.
You sort of mentioned your book in there in a very throwaway manner. Books take some writing. Was it always, was it meant to be a book, or did it sort of develop along the way?
I took loads and loads of notes when I was with Anna. There are a lot of people that have spent a lot of time on self-awareness. I hadn't spent much time on self-awareness. I think understanding yourself really is important, and there are many ways you can do that through psychometric tests and speaking to people. And I just learned so much about myself. I learned that I'm so conscientious, I can't let anyone down. I've got a score 95 out of 100, but I also learned that I'm highly agreeable. So I want to say yes to everyone, but I can't let anyone down. So I learned that I don't very well put boundaries in place. So there was a lot of things that I learned that actually I realized, and when I wrote them down, that these are things that if an entrepreneur knows these things, they might be able to have a more joyful life and respect themselves more and take better care of themselves. So I decided to start writing about it about 3 months after I started seeing Anna. So I was still writing about it. It started my book even while I was seeing Anna. And it got to the point when I was in the room with Anna, I felt like I had 5 million business owners in the room with me, because it was the questions I was asking her and the things I was going through, I wanted to capture not just myself, but for others. So all in all, I hired a coach to keep me accountable, and it was to write a chapter a week in draft. So it was 12 chapters. And I was able to do that. The editing process and bringing in the stuff that really makes it into gold took longer, obviously. So we actually launched it in the following January last year. And yeah, that's good. And when I wrote it, and I think we all have to do this, I thought I'm Marmite. Some people will read it and think, wow, I love the way Penny speaks and that really helps me. Other people, more what I would call a high-read, success-driven business person who doesn't allow emotion into their life, will say, well, no wonder Penny found business hard. It's a very truthful account. I don't hold back anything, and I use myself as a torchbearer, not as the expert, to hopefully create the empathy and with others and help. And I have had some lovely feedback about it, and a lot of speeches, which is very nice, have come out of it, including, surprisingly, in the corporate world, because mental health and mental well-being and mental fitness and how to take personal responsibility for your mental fitness is a theme now that's huge. So, yeah.
We've touched on how important mental health is and emotional support that you're giving to organisations. Have you found that in the midst of the current pandemic that it's required more or less, or are people hiding away? What's your experience?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think I would put it into 2 categories in many ways. They talk about people with fixed mindsets and growth mindsets. And definitely if you've got a growth mindset, you're much more agile to adapt and learn and throw yourselves into, right, this is how it is, and now what am I going to do? Those people that are mentally in a fixed mindset are holding on as tight as they can to everything that their business always has been and just waiting for life to return to normal. And that's where that's a big challenge, I think, for people. And there's no doubt about it, the people with the growth mindset are going to be mentally healthier than the people with the fixed mindset. And I think there are reasons some people are like that, you know, because maybe their business isn't agile and isn't able to suddenly pivot and change and adapt, but it might be also be their personality type. So it is very interesting. I think happily, so maybe surprisingly, but happily, all of the masterminds that we support, and actually our third mastermind has started virtually now, and then we will still meet for the 12 sessions face-to-face when we can. All of our masterminds have this growth mindset, which is maybe more indicative of most small businesses. I mean, I look at, you know, the way you've adapted and how you've supported your clients and got through this. And I mean, even doing a podcast, I mean, the fact that you've even got the time to consider that is a growth mindset. So yeah, it's been really interesting to observe how people are handling this period, whether they're handling with anger and resentment or with acceptance. And I did learn a lot about acceptance when I worked with Anna. Acceptance is a really big subject. And it's actually, acceptance is a process is in the brain, that when you accept something, it takes things from your short-term memory into your long-term memory and allows you to free up and move forward. And sometimes you have to go through a process of acceptance. There were things when I was with Anna that I had to go through a process of acceptance. I had to stop resisting things, stop fighting things, and accept the way things were. I had to let go of the Academy and accept that we just couldn't save it. And that's not just for Thomas and I. That was a huge feeling of remorse towards the members that loved it and relied on it and had their groups on it and ran their blogs on it and everything. So I think anybody listening to this that's still resisting and fighting it, I think they need to get that self-awareness and think about how can they very quickly accept, move it from their instant memory into their long-term memory and start saying, how can I make the most of this new situation I'm in?
I have a very literal Paul saying, which is, I hope I can identify the things I can change. I hope I can identify the things that I cannot change. And I hope I have the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Really, really beautiful. A friend of mine, Nicole, who's actually one of our experts, she's phenomenal. She's pretty retired now. She's done very well as a business coach for FTSE people. I once talked to her about something that was worrying me, and she said, Penny, what's worrying you? Do you have any control over the outcome of what's worrying you? Can you change it? I said, I can't. And she said, you have to let go of the things you cannot change. And so now often when I find myself in a worrying mindset, I think, is there anything within my power, like you just said, to change it? And if there isn't, I have to let go of it and move forward. So I love your saying.
I've got a few. I need to write a book, Penny, but not just yet. So I guess along your journey, you know, you've seen major changes in technology.
Yeah.
And we're in the pandemic. You know, all our stuff from Branson Adams is now online. We're doing a podcast. But again, so when you started selling, just tell us a little bit about, you know, how you've experienced the changes in technology. And, you know, is it good? Is it bad? What do you like? What don't you like?
Wow, that's a real spontaneous question. I love that. Yeah, I mean, we've gone from mainframes. When I started in 1983, we just had terminals and these huge mainframes. And then it was exciting when the PC went onto the desk and all that. And then the internet, and then cloud computing, and then software as a service. And now, you know, people talk about blockchain and AI and, you know, where will it end? And I spend time with my children. I actually have to say to them, could you please stop talking about that? You are freaking me out, because some stuff really scares me. Anybody that watched Years and Years, you know, the way we're allowing technology into our life without realizing it often. So I think the big thing is that we have to take a lot of personal responsibility for the way that we use technology, because it's very addictive, and it's just like alcohol, smoking, anything, you know, nobody's going to stop producing these things. So we have to take personal responsibility for how much we use it and when and why we use it. And I think that's very important now. It's not like you unlock an office door and you go in and then you come away from it. We spend £1,500 a month. So it's just Thomas and I in the business. And then we've got about 5-6 freelance people that work with us, plus and you, because I don't know what we would have to hire a finance director or whatever if we didn't have you as a partner in our business, Branson Adams. So when I look at the resources around us that enable us to run a slick, highly productive business that makes us mostly client facing so that we're not doing too much administration ourselves, we have £1,500 a month spent on around about 42 applications, software as a service apps, from anything from zero and Expensify with one of our clients we have to use, through to lead generation stuff, so right the way through the front and back office of our business. And it's something, the digital skills agenda has been really key to us since we started the academy, helping members to embrace digital and get a digital mindset. That's what my Digital Business Britain manifesto was all about. How do we become a digitally mindset country? But still people are resisting it. And there are so many tiny little hacks you can have in your business that can be transformational. And this is one of the big things that we teach our members of Mastermind, and will do in BIP 100, because now we have at our disposal a number of apps on subscription that actually, if I worked it out, I'd probably need to hire another 6 staff to run as efficiently as I do, which would cost me a lot more than £1,500 a month on software. So now people will listen to this and say, well, it's all right for you, Penny, you've always been in tech. 1983, you were 19. I hate technology. I really do. Thomas laughs at me. When he says, Pen, we need to learn this now, I grimace, and it's nights of pillow talk to encourage me to learn yet another thing. I only do technology because it will help me to achieve the results I want. And the results I want is to spend most of my time with people and clients. And I can only do that by understanding technology. And I think this is the big shift now, is nobody can ignore it. Nobody. And just being able to say, I can use Facebook isn't enough. You need to know how to use Facebook advertising. And just being able to boost a Facebook ad isn't enough. You need to understand far more than that. And Thomas spends hours with our clients, helping them to understand how to use Facebook advertising, for example. Just the awareness of what's out there, and then making the choice. So when I say to our clients, do you want to do this, or do you feel you should do this? I always ask from a point of, is it something you're resisting that's actually negative to your business? Or are you resisting, is it because actually you don't really need to do it, but you're watching someone on Facebook and they're doing it? You really have to eliminate based on, if my business is not going to survive and I'm actually doing too many tasks in my business or employing too many people that's causing a strain on my business, you've got to look at technology.
Yeah, and technology's, it's changed what I do to a very large extent. When I started, it was all handwritten and you had to double check it and get stuff typed.
Yeah, I know. And I love the fact that now with you, I've always for years sent an envelope of receipts but now you've taught me and integrated into Xero the fact that I can put up my own receipts and take a photograph of them. And I never carry a receipt, because as soon as I buy a coffee or something, it goes in. And I no longer send you an envelope, for example. So, you're encouraging the use of technology all the time as well.
That's a perfect example, because it saves you time and it saves us time.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And it means that you and I are talking strategy more and proper consulting support, which is what I need.
It's what we're all trying to do. We want face-to-face. We want to add value.
Exactly.
So I suppose we're coming towards the end, and you've touched on a bit of what you're doing in the future. But the real question, what does the future hold for Penny?
Well, I very much hope it includes my husband staying around with me. That's very important. Our 3 kids. So my family is very important. Grandchildren would be nice one day, but I'm sorry if that's just made any of my kids shudder. From a business point of view, it's, we see the mastermind and BIP 100 being a long-term journey for us. Very excited about our camper van. We hope to buy our castle again one day, but it'll be a little castle, not a big one. We don't need that now, but we still very much look forward to putting our roots down in our own home. And that's something that excites us, and we're building towards that. Farnham is somewhere we never want to leave Farnham. And happily, 2 out of 3 of our kids have probably decided they're going to also settle back in Farnham. And I think the other one is more than likely to, which is very lovely, quite unusual now. I've got my sisters and my dad in Farnham, it's all my nieces and nephews. So I'd say stay married, have my children, BIP 100, mastermind, a home, and travel a lot in our camper van.
Fantastic. So, unless there's anything else you want to add, I think we've reached the end.
No, it's just such a lovely interview with you. And I've loved all your interviews that you've had with Paul and Tracy Jarvis and everything. So I think it's a great series. So thank you so much for having me on this. You're a lovely man, Paul.
Well, thank you very much, Penny, and we'll speak soon.
Fantastic.